In 1700, India made up a large share of the world economy. Looking at India's situation today, this might sound hard to believe, but at the time it was a fact. India was the backbone of global trade. It was a land of gold, silk, and spices. Fine cotton textiles, jewelry, dyes, and luxury goods were sold across continents. Its cities were filled with skilled artisans, merchants, and workshops. Bengal was so wealthy that it alone possessed more economic power than all of Britain. But by the time we reached the year 1947, when India gained its independence, its share of the world economy had fallen to below 4%. This loss did not happen on its own, of course. Before we dive deeply into how a great power like India ended up in this position, welcome to Historical Finance. If you feel these videos add something to you, don't forget to subscribe. So what happened to India? For nearly 200 years, the British Empire operated one of the most significant systems of wealth transfer in human history. It did not merely rule India, it turned it into a source of revenue. A civilization that once exported luxury goods to Rome, the Arab world, and China became a raw material depot for British industry. This transformation may have begun with weapons, but it completed with accounting. How did one of the richest societies on earth become so poor? The answer does not lie in war, but in financial design. To understand this, we need to go much further back, long before the Union Jack ever flew over Delhi. In the early 1600s, India was ruled by the Mughal Empire. This meant roughly 150 million people, nearly a quarter of the world's population at the time. Advanced agriculture, complex irrigation systems, bustling ports. Indian textiles were so valuable that European merchants traveled for months at sea to obtain cotton, silk, pepper, and indigo. Goods flowed from the ports of Surat and Calcutta to global markets. India ran trade surpluses with almost everyone. Gold and silver flowed into the country, not out. But across the sea, a small island nation was rising. Britain. It was ambitious, organized, and had discovered a new tool, the joint stock company. In 1600, Queen Elizabeth granted London merchants the charter of the East India Company. At first it was an ordinary trading company, but it soon turned into a state. It had shareholders, a board of directors, and before long, its own army. At the beginning, competition was intense. The Portuguese, the Dutch, and the French were all present in India. Most were seeking trade partnerships. The British, however, wanted monopoly. Their real advantage was not weapons but money. With ships financed through bonds, insured risks, and London's credit network, they built a system that could scale like nothing before it. The company soon realized something crucial. The real money was not in trade, but in taxation. In 1757, the Battle of Plassey changed everything. It may look like a small clash, but its consequences shaped the world. With a limited number of British soldiers, the Nawab of Bengal was defeated. The real turning point came afterward. The company gained the right to collect Bengal's taxes. This marked the beginning of corporate colonialism. Within a decade, millions of pounds were flowing from Bengal to London every year. So much wealth was extracted that inflation exploded, famine began, and the regional economy collapsed. London grew richer. Calcutta starved. While investors earned profits from shares, the source of that money was farmers who could barely find food in their fields. In 1770, the Great Bengal Famine killed around 10 million people. Yet the company did not stop collecting taxes. Grain exports continued. For investors in London, it was a profitable year. The market had taken precedence over mercy. In Britain, this system was presented as civilization, railways, law, education, but everything was designed for extraction. Railways were not built to connect people to each other, but to connect fields to ports. Schools did not educate free thinkers. They trained clerks for the colonial bureaucracy. Courts did not deliver justice. They enforced debt. Even the railways were profitable, not for the Indian people, but for British investors. A 5% return was guaranteed. If the railways earned money, London benefited. If they lost money, India paid. The risk belonged to India. The reward belonged to Britain. This system became known as the drain of wealth. Dadabhai Naoroji described it as the bleeding of India, wealth flowing to Britain every year without compensation. And calculations show that from 1765 to 1938, the modern equivalent of roughly $45 trillion was extracted from India. The consequences were not only economic. Indian artisans, weavers, and shipbuilders disappeared. Textile centers like Dhaka collapsed. India turned into an exporter of raw materials and an importer of manufactured goods. Famines increased. Wages fell. The empire grew. Over time, the company left and the crown took over. But the system remained. India financed Britain's wars, civil servants' salaries, and pensions. The empire stood on Indian money. India had effectively become the empire's central bank. When independence arrived in 1947, India inherited not only poverty, but this legacy as well. And even though the world looked different, the mechanism was familiar. Debt, trade, deficits, capital outflows. The names had changed, but the logic was the same. Even today, billions of dollars flow every year, from poor countries to rich ones. There are no weapons, no flags. But the balance sheets are still operating. The lesson is this: empires do not disappear. They change shape. They move from land to ledgers, from armies to contracts. India's story is the clearest example of this because much of the modern global economy was tested there. But India endured. It rebuilt, slowly with difficulty. Because exploitation is fast. Recovery takes time. That is the cruel mathematics of empire. Britain did not conquer India only with soldiers. It conquered it with accountants. And that ledger has still not been closed. History does not repeat itself exactly, but balance sheets tend to produce familiar results. If this gave you a different perspective, you're in the right place.